Hey everybody, in this lecture video, we're going to talk about some basic sentence structure issues. This is so important, especially in business writing, that you make sure that everything you mark as a sentence is actually a sentence. Just because it has a capital at the beginning and punctuation at the end does not make it a sentence. There are certain things that are required to make something a complete sentence. There are things about sentence structure that you need to understand. So this is a very important lesson because it makes you look just a little bit unprofessional if you send something out and there are incomplete sentences in it or incorrect sentences in it. So that's, the overall purpose of this course is to help you with that. And then also for sure, we want to talk about sentence structure in this lesson. We're going to talk about what makes a complete, correct sentence because clarity and appropriate sentence structure are just so important. Not all groups of words are sentences. That's something to remember. Sometimes you'll see a group of words and you feel a little bit confused because it's written like a sentence, and that is probably because it is not actually a complete sentence. So the first thing we need to know about sentences is that every single sentence has to have a subject and a predicate. A subject and a predicate must work together to express a complete thought. A sentence expresses a complete thought. Now, the subject of the sentence, which is what we're going to start with, the subject tells us who or what the sentence is about, okay? And there'll be like a subject phrase and then also a simple subject of the one thing that the sentence is about, okay? We're going to start with a really simple sentence. The dog barked. What or who is this sentence about? It is about the dog. That is your simple subject, the dog. Okay. So then we move down to the next sentence and we have a slightly more complicated sentence that has more words in it. The new dog in the neighborhood barked. Okay, the reason this one can get confusing for one thing is that there are two nouns in it. What are your two nouns? You have dog is a noun and you have neighborhood is a noun, right? So you might go, what is the sentence about? Well, look here. In, you have a preposition, which means that neighborhood is the object of the preposition. And what did we say about objects of prepositions? They can never be the subject of a sentence. So this part, in the neighborhood, happens to be a prepositional phrase in the middle of your subject, of your full subject, but it is not your simple subject. It is not what the sentence is about. The sentence is still about the dog. It's just a more involved sentence. It's a longer sentence. The new dog in the neighborhood barked. We have an adjective, we have a prepositional phrase, but still the sentence is about the dog. So that is your simple subject. Now, compound subject may mean you can have two things or more, two or more things that the sentence is about. The dog and the cat are fighting. In this sentence, you have two entities that are performing action that the sentence is about, and it's the dog and the cat. So don't think it has to be just one, okay? There can be more than one primary noun, primary subject. Okay, now the predicate tells us what the subject is or is doing, okay? The complete predicate includes the main verb and all of its modifiers. Remember that verbs can show action like run, walk, or jump, or they can be verbs and helping verbs like is, was, have, or should. In our example sentences, these two sentences have the exact same predicate. The predicate is barked. That is what the dog did in both of these sentences, okay? Barked. In the last sentence, the predicate is are fighting, okay? Because you have the linking verb are and fighting that goes with it. That's what they are doing, okay? So the first step in formulating a sentence is to remember that every sentence, no matter how simple, it can be two words, as long as it has a subject and a predicate, or no matter how long, no matter how many words are strung together, if there's not a subject or a predicate and a predicate, if there's not something the sentence is about and something that they are or are doing that completes a thought, then it is not a sentence. Let's look right here. He ran. Look at this sentence. That is 2 words together. That's not much of a sentence, but it has a subject, he. I keep doing that. I apologize. It has a subject, he, and it has a predicate, ran. Right? So that's a full sentence. It's 2 words, but it's a full sentence. Now, this next one, it looks like a pretty long string of words, and you see a capital letter. It says the very strong, in shape 25-year-old marathon runner. Okay, what this is a very long, involved subject. You have a subject, but what is missing? Your predicate is missing. It doesn't tell you what the very strong, in shape 25-year-old marathon runner did. You might assume he ran, but it does not say it. So this is not a complete sentence. And that's what we need to remember. You have to remember it has to have a subject and a predicate. It has to complete a thought to be a sentence. I know I've said it a million times, but we'll just say it over and over again because that's the main thing that you need to remember. Now we're going to look at, as we start to structure more complicated sentences, the difference between a phrase and a clause and how they're used and what you need to understand about them. Okay? A phrase can include a subject or a predicate, but it will not have both. A phrase does not express a complete thought. You can have a noun phrase like we see here, a beautiful red car. That is a noun phrase. It is describing car. Car is the main noun there. But a beautiful red car is the whole noun phrase. That could be in a sentence, but it could not be a sentence of its own. Okay, a verb phrase. We see drove quickly. Okay, that is a verb phrase that is telling us, oh, I went a whole new direction with that color. That's okay. Drove quickly. It tells what they did and how they did it, but it does not complete a thought, okay? You can have a prepositional phrase, as we've already talked about, to the store. That's a phrase, but it doesn't really tell you anything, okay? So phrases, they enhance our sentences. They give us more information on our subject and predicate, but they do not complete a thought. Now, clauses are different. Clauses have both a subject and a predicate, and most clauses could stand alone as very simple sentences, okay? Independent clauses are what we call the ones that could stand alone as a sentence. Dependent clauses leave you hanging for more information, and here's some examples of clauses. Dependent clauses also have a subject and a predicate, but they sort of leave you hanging for more information. If you look at this clause, although Miles led the project. Let's look at this. The reason it is dependent is because of this word, although. If you took out the word although, Miles led the project could be a clause, right? That could also be a sentence. But when you add although Miles led the project, then you're losing something. Then you know you need more information. So this is a dependent clause, okay? And this is a dependent clause in the middle of a complex sentence because it has a dependent clause and it has an independent clause. Because if you look at, he credited the full team with its implementation, that could be a sentence itself, right? He credited the full team with its implementation. That has a subject, he, and it has a predicate, right? Credited the full team with its implementation is your predicate, whole predicate there. So this is a complex sentence because you see the difference between an independent clause. It stands alone as a sentence. You could just say it and not think, but what do you mean? If someone says to you, although Miles led the project, you're going to say, and then what? Okay, if they leave that word although in there. So that is the difference between an independent clause and a dependent clause. Now, there are compound sentences that have 2 independent clauses in them. And see, we're sort of using the same subject, Miles and his project. But here we see Miles led the project. Like we talked about, you drop that although. And so that is an independent clause. And compound sentences joined with a conjunction. And he created the full team with its implementation, credited the full team with its implementation. That is another independent clause. Okay. So you see the difference in the types of sentences. We have three types: complex, compound, compound, complex. I'm sorry, I don't think I told you that. Complex sentences, as you see, they have one dependent clause and one independent clause. Compound subjects have two independent clauses. You cannot have a sentence with two dependent clauses because that would just be very strangely worded. And then you can also have compound complex, where you have one dependent clause and two or more independent clauses. And you see that here. Again, we've got the same dependent clause, although Miles led the project, and we know that it is dependent because of this word that was added, although means that we need more information. He credited the full team with this implementation. That is one independent clause. Man, I really cannot stop doing that, can I? And you have your conjunction here to show that you're about to have another clause. The manager was pleased. The manager was pleased is another, man, it's like jinxed, is another independent clause, excuse me, because the manager was pleased could be a sentence that makes full sense all by himself. If I say the manager was pleased, you know who we're talking about and how they are, okay? So that is the three different types of sentences based on the two different types of clauses. Remember, it's right there in the title. Independent clauses are independent. They can stand alone as sentences. Dependent clauses are dependent. You need more information. You need another clause to make that make sense, okay? And there are three types of sentences that come together if you're using clauses. Complex, they have one dependent clause and one independent clause. Compound have two independent clauses joined with a conjunction, and compound complex have one dependent clause and two or more independent clauses, okay? But remember, we have to be careful with punctuation. We're going to have a whole module on punctuation, but we need to start talking about it now as we're talking about sentence structure. You have to have some sort of punctuation, right, in all sentences. It's not a sentence if you don't put punctuation at the end, or it's a sentence with an error, okay? Now, I know that most software and even email is going to alert you if you have punctuation or grammatical errors, but it's a good idea to proofread and just double check. Okay, now we're going to look at a few common sentence structure errors. The first one is called the fragment. We've already talked about it a little bit. A fragment is an incomplete thought written with capitalization and punctuation as though it was a sentence. This, the adorable small child. It has, as you see, a capital letter and a period, but that does not make it a sentence because we don't know what the adorable small child did. This is a fragment with no predicate, okay? You could rearrange this and say something like, the small child was adorable, if that is the idea that you're trying to express, right, with the adorable small child, is that the child was adorable. And now you have a subject and you have a verb. You have something that the child is doing, right? So you could rearrange that way, but the adorable small child is not a complete sentence. The small child was adorable is, okay? Now, the next type of common error is the comma splice. That is forcing two complete sentences together. It's like you're trying to write a little more involved. You want it to sound more professional. You want to be using those compound complex sentences, but the error you make is that you just do a comma splice. And a comma splice is forcing two complete sentences together with just putting a comma between them, okay? You see an example of a comma splice here. The child is adorable. The child belongs to my neighbor. There's just a comma in the middle. This is unnecessary. You need to do one of two things here. You need to either put a period here and capitalize that, and now you have two sentences. The child is adorable. The child belongs to my neighbor. Or you could do the child is adorable and, the child belongs to my neighbor. Either way is correct. It just depends on, with those two sentences, they might actually sound better as two separate sentences. But either way, the thing you cannot do is just leave them together with nothing but a comma between them. That is called a comma splice. And now there's also a run-on sentence. And we've all been trapped in that, where we're trying to read something and someone has written this run-on sentence, just this long string of words with no punctuation in the middle. There's a capital here and a period way down here and all these words in the middle. Okay. The child is adorable. He belongs to my neighbor. He likes to play soccer. See, this is 3 complete sentences. The child is adorable, period. Capital, he belongs to my neighbor. And you could do this several ways, period. This would be the simplest way to fix it immediately. He likes to play soccer. Or you could say, and he likes to play soccer, right? There are different ways to fix it, but the thing you don't want to do is just have this string of words that's impossible to keep up with, right? And no punctuation in the middle. Okay, that's the really basics of sentence construction. If you have any questions about it, there's more information in the module, but if you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to me. I am here to help you. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.